A poor widow saved a dying biker, not knowing he'd return with something unexpected. It started on a dark mountain road, when a quiet woman pulled a broken man from a wreck that should have killed him. She thought it was just a moment of kindness, a one-time rescue, and when he disappeared without a word. She tried to forget him, but months later he roared back into her life, holding a baby, his baby, and behind him came danger so deadly it could swallow them all. Now she's caught in a storm she never asked for, running from men who will stop at nothing. And the biker who once vanished? He's hiding a truth even more heartbreaking than she knows, when every mile pulls them deeper into fear and closer to each other. Can an ordinary widow protect a stranger's child? Or will the past chasing them destroy the family they never expected to become? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The storm came without warning, sweeping across Pine Ridge like an angry spirit. Leah Carter gripped her steering wheel tighter as rain hammered against the windshield of her old pickup truck. The wipers squeaked back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the downpour. Lightning flashed, illuminating the dense pine forest on either side of the winding mountain road. She was tired after her evening shift at the lodge laundry, where she'd spent hours folding fresh linens and feeding sheets through industrial washers. But she knew these roads well enough to navigate them even in weather like this. Or so she thought. As her truck rounded a sharp bend, the headlights swept across something that made her heart leap into her throat. Metal glinted in the darkness, twisted, broken metal. A motorcycle lay on its side, parts scattered across the wet asphalt. And there, barely visible in the rain, was a dark shape that could only be its rider. "Oh, dear Lord," Leah whispered, her hands shaking as she pulled over to the shoulder. For a moment she sat frozen, listening to the rhythmic thump of her wipers and the drumming of rain on the roof. The thought of what she might find when she stepped out made her stomach clench. But she couldn't just drive past. Taking a deep breath, Leah grabbed her flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the storm. The wind whipped her hair around her face as she picked her way carefully toward the fallen rider. He was face down on the pavement, his leather jacket gleaming wet in her flashlight beam. Leah knelt beside him, her jeans soaking through instantly. With trembling fingers, she pressed against his neck, searching for a pulse. There, faint but steady. "You're going to be all right," she said softly, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "I'm going to help you." Lightning crackled overhead, followed by a boom of thunder that seemed to shake the mountain itself. Leah looked up, spotting a rocky outcropping just off the road. She couldn't leave him exposed to the elements like this. Getting her arms under his shoulders, she began to drag him toward shelter. He was heavy, so much heavier than the laundry bags she was used to lifting. Her muscles strained with every step, but she kept going, kept pulling until they were both under the outcropping. In the beam of her flashlight, she could see his face now. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe in his early 30s, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and a day's worth of stubble on his jaw. A nasty gash above his eyebrow was still bleeding, mixing with the rain that ran down his face. "Hold on," Leah murmured, more to steady herself than for his benefit. "Just hold on." The next challenge would be getting him into her truck. The outcropping provided temporary shelter, but he needed medical attention. Leah looked at her pickup, then back at the unconscious man. The distance seemed impossible, but she had no choice. She worked methodically, the way she did with her heaviest loads of laundry. First, get a good grip. Then, lift with her legs, not her back. Step by careful step, She half carried, half dragged him toward the truck. The rain pelted them both, making every movement treacherous on the slick ground. By the time she reached the passenger door, Leah was gasping for breath. Her arms trembled with fatigue, but she couldn't stop now. Somehow, through what felt like sheer miracle, she managed to heave him onto the seat. She buckled him in, making sure he was secure before closing the door. Back behind the wheel, Leah took a moment to catch her breath. Her clothes were soaked through and she was shivering. But none of that mattered. What mattered was getting this stranger somewhere safe. The nearest hospital was over an hour away, down treacherous mountain roads that would be even more dangerous in this weather. Her cabin was only 10 minutes further up the mountain. The decision made itself. As she drove, Leah kept glancing at her passenger. His breathing was shallow but regular, his head lolling against the window with each bump in the road. "Stay with me," she said softly. "We're almost there." Her cabin appeared through the rain-streaked windshield, a solid shadow against the stormy sky. Leah pulled up as close to the front door as she could get, then faced her final challenge, getting him inside. It took every ounce of strength she had left. Step by painful step, she maneuvered him through her front door and down the short hallway to her spare bedroom. By the time she lowered him onto the bed, her arms were shaking so badly she could barely stand. But she wasn't done yet. Leah worked quickly, removing his wet jacket and boots, checking for obvious injuries. The cut on his forehead worried her most. It would need stitches eventually, but for now she cleaned it as best she could and applied butterfly bandages from her first aid kit. Thunder rolled outside as she finished, a deep rumble that seemed to echo the gravity of the situation. Leah sank into the chair beside the bed, watching the shallow rise and fall of the stranger's chest. In the soft lamplight, she could see bruises already forming on his face and arms. "Dear Lord," she prayed aloud, her voice barely a whisper above the sound of rain against the windows. "Please watch over this man. Guide my hands to help him and give him strength to heal." She paused, watching a drop of water trace down his temple. "And please let me have done the right thing by bringing him here." The storm raged on outside, but in the quiet of the spare bedroom, there was only the sound of shallow breathing and whispered prayers as Leah kept her vigil over the mysterious stranger who had quite literally crashed into her life. The first rays of dawn filtered through Leah's bedroom window, rousing her from a fitful sleep. Her muscles ached from last night's rescue efforts, reminding her of the stranger in her spare room. She pulled on her robe and padded down the hallway, her bare feet silent against the wooden floors. The morning light revealed what darkness had hidden. Her mysterious guest lay tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, his face flushed with fever. His breathing came in short, labored gasps, and when she touched his forehead, the heat radiating from his skin alarmed her. "Oh no," she whispered, hurrying to the kitchen. She filled a bowl with cool water and grabbed clean cloths from her linen closet. Back in the spare room, she began the gentle work of bringing down his fever, laying cool compresses on his forehead and neck. As she worked, he muttered incomprehensibly, lost in fever dreams. His head tossed from side to side, dark hair damp with sweat. Leah remembered the antibiotics Sarah Miller had given her last month when she'd had that awful tooth infection. She'd only taken half the prescription. The rest might help him. She retrieved the orange bottle from her medicine cabinet, reading the label carefully before measuring out a dose. Getting him to swallow was a challenge. She had to stroke his throat gently, the way she'd once done with sick calves on her parents' farm. In the kitchen, she put together a simple chicken broth, the kind her mother had always made when anyone was ill. The familiar routine of chopping vegetables and stirring the pot helped calm her nerves. The savory aroma filled the cabin, bringing a touch of normalcy to this strange situation. Throughout the morning, she alternated between checking on him and trying to maintain her usual routines. She was hanging fresh towels when she heard him stir. Hurrying to his bedside, she found his eyes open, though glazed with fever. "Leah," he mumbled, his voice rough but clear. She froze. She hadn't told him her name, hadn't had the chance to. "How did you—" But he had already slipped back into unconsciousness, leaving her standing there with goosebumps on her arms and questions in her heart. The next 2 days fell into a rhythm. She'd wake early, check his fever, give him medicine, and try to get some broth into him whenever he was lucid enough to swallow. Between these tasks, she talked to him, filling the quiet room with gentle conversation. "I've lived here for 15 years now," she told him while changing his compress. "David, that was my husband. He built this cabin himself. Said he wanted something solid, something that would last." She smoothed the damp cloth across his forehead. "He's been gone 5 years this August. Sometimes I think I hear his boots on the porch, but it's just the wind." She told him about her job at the lodge laundry, about the satisfaction of turning chaos into order, one load at a time. She described the way the mountains looked in different seasons, how the wildflowers painted the meadows in spring, how the aspen leaves danced gold in autumn. On the 3rd day, his fever finally broke. He sat up, weak but clear-eyed, and looked at her with such intensity that she nearly dropped the bowl of broth she was carrying. "Thank you," he said simply, but the words carried a weight that made her chest tight. There was something in his voice, a softness, a sincerity that caught her completely off guard. Their eyes met for a long moment, and Leah felt something shift in the quiet space between them. Later that afternoon, she made her daily trip to check the mailbox at the end of her long driveway. The walk gave her time to think, to sort through the confusing emotions of the past few days. She'd grown used to his presence, she realized, used to having someone to talk to, even if he couldn't always respond. But when she returned to the cabin, something felt wrong. The silence was different, emptier somehow. She hurried to the spare room, her heart already knowing what she would find. The bed was empty. The sheets were smoothed, the pillow undisturbed, as if trying to erase all evidence of its recent occupant. No note, no goodbye, just empty space where a person had been. Leah stood in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame. The abandonment hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. She thought she was past this feeling, thought she'd built her walls high enough after David died. But here it was again, that hollow ache of being left behind. The room seemed to mock her with its tidiness, its return to normal. But normal felt wrong now, felt lonely in a way it hadn't before. She stared at the pillow where his head had rested while she'd tended his fever, told him stories, cared for him. The soft afternoon light streamed through the window, illuminating dancing dust motes in the empty air, and Leah felt every one of her solitary years pressing down on her shoulders. The days following Jack's disappearance settled into a familiar pattern, but everything felt slightly off-kilter, like a picture hanging just a few degrees crooked. Leah went through her routines, mechanically, washing, folding, cleaning, but her mind kept wandering back to those 3 strange days when her quiet cabin had held another presence. Every morning she found herself pausing at the kitchen window, coffee cup warming her hands, eyes drawn to the empty driveway. The gravel path stretched down the mountainside, winding between the pines, and each time a breeze stirred the dust, her heart would skip. But it was never him. At work, she caught herself listening for heavy footsteps, half expecting to see him appear in the doorway of the lodge laundry. The rhythmic tumble of sheets and towels usually soothed her, but now it felt like background noise to her distracted thoughts. She folded fresh linens with practiced ease, her hands knowing the motions, while her mind replayed moments from those fever-touched days. The way he'd said her name before he should have known it. The gentle gratitude in his eyes when the fever finally broke. "You're a million miles away today," said Mrs. Henderson, one of her regular cleaning clients, after Leah had to ask her to repeat a question 3 times. "Just tired," Leah replied with an apologetic smile, though sleep wasn't the problem. The problem was that she couldn't stop thinking about a stranger who'd vanished like morning mist. After 2 weeks of this, Leah finally gave in to Martha Ellis's persistent invitations for evening tea. Martha had been her neighbor since before David died, and she had an uncanny way of knowing when Leah needed to talk, even if Leah herself didn't realize it yet. Martha's kitchen was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of fresh-baked cookies and the gentle tick of an old wall clock. Leah sat at the worn kitchen table, wrapped her hands around a steaming mug, and tried to find the right words. "I feel so foolish," she finally admitted, staring into her tea as if it might hold answers. "I barely knew him. 3 days, that's all it was, and most of that time he was unconscious or delirious with fever." She shook her head, frustrated with herself. "I don't even know why I'm still thinking about it." Martha settled into her favorite chair, the cushions sighing softly beneath her. Her gray hair caught the evening light from the window, creating a soft halo effect that matched her gentle expression. "There's nothing foolish about caring, dear. Sometimes the heart notices things long before the head does." "But notices what?" Leah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was just passing through, like so many others who come through Pine Ridge and never look back." "Was he?" Martha's eyes were kind but knowing. "You said yourself there was something different about him. The way he knew your name before you told him. The way he thanked you before he left." "That's just it. He didn't thank me before he left. He just left." Leah traced the rim of her mug with one finger. "No note, no goodbye. Nothing." "And that bothers you more than you think it should," Martha observed quietly. Leah nodded, feeling the familiar sting of tears. "I thought I was past this. Past feeling. Left behind. David's been gone 5 years, and I've built a life. It's a quiet life, but it's mine. I shouldn't let some stranger's disappearance affect me like this." Martha reached across the table and covered Leah's hand with her own. Her skin was soft and warm, marked with the gentle wrinkles of a life well lived. "My Henry used to say that the heart is like a garden. It keeps growing things whether we plan to or not. Sometimes weeds, yes, but sometimes unexpected flowers too. Don't be so quick to pull them up just because you didn't plant them there." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Finally, Leah managed a small smile. "When did you get so wise, Martha?" "Oh, somewhere between my 3rd marriage proposal and my 1st grandchild," Martha chuckled, her eyes twinkling. "Now have another cookie. They're not nearly as good the next day." Later that night, Leah sat in her favorite chair by the window, watching darkness creep up the mountainside. The cabin felt especially quiet after the warmth of Martha's kitchen. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine through the screen, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called softly. She tried to take Martha's words to heart, to accept that sometimes feelings don't need to make sense. But acceptance was a slippery thing, especially in the dark hours when doubts grew strongest. Jack had been just another traveler on Pine Ridge Road, another story to add to the mountain's long memory. Nothing more. The lamp beside her cast a warm circle of light, but beyond its reach, the mountains had become black silhouettes against a star-scattered sky. Leah watched until her eyes grew heavy, until the day's questions began to blur into tomorrow's routine. Finally, she stood and reached for the lamp. The brass switch was cool beneath her fingers as she turned it, plunging the room into darkness. As she made her way to bed, she pushed away thoughts of motorcycle engines and fever-bright eyes, of unspoken words and empty rooms. She had no way of knowing that the next time she saw Jack Raynor, her carefully ordered world would tilt on its axis, that everything she thought she knew about herself and her quiet life would change forever. 3 months had passed since Jack's disappearance, and summer had settled fully over Pine Ridge. The afternoon sun beat down on Leah's shoulders as she worked in her small vegetable garden, her hands deep in the rich soil. Tomato plants stretched toward the sky, their green fruit promising future harvests. The familiar rhythm of gardening usually brought her peace, but lately, even this sanctuary felt hollow. She sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wild roses from the bushes that lined her fence. The mountains rose before her, ancient and unchanging, their peaks still holding patches of snow despite the summer heat. The sound came first as a distant rumble, like approaching thunder. Leah's hands stilled in the dirt. Her heart seemed to skip, then race, as the unmistakable growl of a motorcycle engine grew louder. She hadn't heard that sound since that stormy night 3 months ago, but she would know it anywhere. The bike appeared around the bend in her dirt road, kicking up dust in its wake. Leah slowly stood, her legs shaky beneath her. The rider's broad shoulders were exactly as she remembered, though this time he sat straight and strong, not crumpled in pain. Jack brought the motorcycle to a stop in her driveway, and Leah noticed something odd, something she couldn't quite make out wrapped against his chest. Her breath caught in her throat as he swung off the bike. He looked different from the injured man she'd nursed back to health. His face was gaunt, dark circles shadowing his eyes, and there was something haunted in his expression that hadn't been there before. But what made Leah's world tilt sideways was the tiny bundle cradled in his arms. A baby, no more than a few months old, wrapped in a pale pink blanket. Jack? His name came out as barely more than a whisper. He took a step toward her, then stopped, as if unsure of his welcome. Leah, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. I'm sorry to show up like this, but I didn't know where else to go. The baby stirred in his arms, making small, fussy sounds. Jack adjusted his hold with surprising gentleness, and Leah caught a glimpse of wispy dark hair and tiny fingers clutching at the blanket. This is Molly, he said softly. She's my daughter. Leah's mind struggled to process this revelation. Your daughter? She repeated, taking an unconscious step backward toward her cabin door. Jack nodded, pain flickering across his features. Her mother. Her name was Tessa. His voice cracked slightly on the name. We were together before I got out, before I left the gang. Understanding began to dawn, bringing with it a cold wave of dread. Leah had suspected Jack's past wasn't entirely clean. The tattoos, the wariness in his eyes, the way he'd disappeared without a trace. But hearing him confirm it made her stomach clench with anxiety. Tessa wasn't strong enough to leave when I did, Jack continued, his words coming faster now, as if he needed to get them out before they choked him. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know until... He swallowed hard. They killed her, the gang, because of me, because she helped me escape and because of Molly. They see her as proof of my betrayal. Leah's back hit the doorframe. Her heart pounded against her ribs as the full weight of what he was saying sank in. A violent gang. Murder. A baby in danger. This wasn't her quiet world of garden soil and mountain sunsets. This was something dark and dangerous, something that could shatter the peace she'd worked so hard to build. "They're hunting us," Jack said, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "I've been running for weeks, trying to stay ahead of them, but I'm running out of options, out of places to hide. And Molly..." His voice broke again. "She deserves better than this, better than always running, always looking over our shoulders." As if on cue, Molly began to stir more actively in his arms. The blanket fell back slightly, revealing a perfect little face with Jack's dark eyes. Those eyes blinked open, focusing on Leah with an infant's pure, uncomplicated trust. Then something happened that made Leah's carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. Molly's tiny arms reached out toward her, small fingers opening and closing in that universal baby gesture of wanting to be held. A soft coo escaped the baby's lips, full of innocent hope. "Please," Jack said, and Leah had never heard such raw desperation in a human voice. "Please help us. I know I have no right to ask, not after leaving the way I did, but you're the only person I trust. The only one who showed me real kindness without wanting anything in return." Leah stood frozen in her doorway, her heart at war with itself. Every practical bone in her body screamed at her to say no, to protect herself from the danger Jack had brought to her door. But Molly was still reaching for her, making those soft baby sounds that seemed to bypass all rational thought and go straight to her heart. "Please," Jack whispered again, his voice breaking. "Help us." Leah's hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. Despite every warning bell ringing in her mind, she couldn't turn away the exhausted man and his innocent baby. "Come inside," she said softly. "Both of you." Jack's shoulders sagged with visible relief as he followed her into the cabin's warm interior. The familiar space felt different now, charged with an unfamiliar tension that made Leah's movements jerky and uncertain as she headed for the kitchen. "I'll make some tea," she offered, needing something ordinary to do with her shaking hands. The ritual of filling the kettle and gathering mugs helped steady her nerves, though she could feel Jack's presence like a weight behind her. "Here," she said, turning around. "Let me hold her while you drink." The words surprised her even as they left her mouth, but something in her couldn't bear to see him trying to juggle both baby and mug with his obvious exhaustion. Jack hesitated only a moment before carefully transferring Molly to Leah's arms. The baby settled against her chest with surprising ease, making soft, contented sounds that tugged at Leah's heart. "She likes you," Jack said quietly, wrapping his hands around the steaming mug. "She's usually not so good with strangers." "Tell me everything," Leah said, gently swaying with Molly. "From the beginning." Jack took a long drink of tea, as if gathering strength. "I was with the Iron Knights for 8 years. Or began. Started young, stupid, thinking it was all about brotherhood and freedom. By the time I realized what they really were, the violence, the criminal operations, the way they destroyed lives, I was in too deep." His voice grew harder. "But watching them hurt innocent people, watching them ruin families, something in me couldn't take it anymore. I started planning my exit, saving money, making connections outside the gang. It took 2 years, but I finally got out." "That's when you met Tessa?" Leah asked softly. Jack nodded, pain flooding his features. "She worked at a diner in this little town where I was laying low. She was different, kind, saw something in me worth saving." He swallowed hard. "We fell in love, started making plans for a real life together. But the Knights found me first, I had to run again to protect her. What I didn't know was that she was already pregnant. Leah looked down at Molly, seeing now the echo of another woman's features in the baby's face. What happened to her? She tried to contact me when Molly was born. The Knights intercepted the message. Jack's hands tightened around the mug until his knuckles went white. They went after her, demanding to know where I was. Tessa, she got Molly to a neighbor, then led them on a chase in the opposite direction. She died protecting our daughter. Tears spilled down Leah's cheeks as she held Molly closer. I'm so sorry, Jack. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he continued, his voice was rough with grief and determination. I got to Molly in time, but they've been hunting us ever since. We've been moving constantly, never staying in one place more than a day or two. But there's hope. I've made contact with a man named Brother Calvin. He runs a safe haven 2 states away for people escaping situations like this. He has connections, resources, ways to make people disappear legally. As Jack spoke, Leah was changing Molly's position to check her diaper. That's when she saw them. Faint bruises on the baby's back, likely from being jerked around during their hurried escapes. The sight made her stomach turn. How? She started, then had to clear her throat. How do you know you can trust this Brother Calvin? He's helped others get out of the Knights before. He's the real deal, former military chaplain who dedicated his life to this work after seeing too many lives destroyed by gang violence. Jack leaned forward, his eyes intense. Leah, I know this is crazy. I know I'm asking too much. But we need help getting to the safe haven. They're too close behind us now, and I can't. His voice cracked. I can't keep Molly safe alone anymore. Leah looked down at the baby in her arms, then around at her peaceful cabin. The life she'd built here was simple, but secure. Safe. What Jack was asking meant leaving everything behind, stepping into danger, risking herself for a man she barely knew and his innocent child. But as she stood there debating, Molly reached up and touched her face with tiny, warm fingers. The simple gesture of trust broke something open in Leah's heart. When do we leave? She asked quietly. Jack's eyes filled with grateful tears. As soon as possible. Tonight. The next hour passed in a blur of efficient packing. Leah moved through her cabin, selecting only the essentials: clothes, first aid supplies, her emergency cash, important documents. Her hands shook as she wrote a quick note to Martha, not explaining everything but enough to keep her elderly friend from worrying too much. The sun was setting by the time they finished loading her old truck. Jack had insisted they take it instead of his motorcycle, knowing it would be safer and less conspicuous. Leah stood in her doorway one last time, taking in the sight of her sanctuary, knowing she might never see it again. With steady hands that belied her inner turmoil, she locked the door. Jack was already securing Molly into a car seat he'd somehow acquired in his travels. The baby was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the magnitude of what was happening. Leah climbed into the driver's seat, her heart pounding as she turned the key. The familiar rumble of the engine felt different now, no longer the sound of coming home, but of leaving it behind. As they pulled out of her driveway, she watched in the rearview mirror as the mountains that had sheltered her for so long faded into the gathering dusk, taking with them the life she had known. The old truck's headlights cut through the darkness as they headed east on back roads, avoiding main highways. Leah's hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to make her knuckles white, while Jack studied a wrinkled map by flashlight in the passenger seat. In the back, Molly slept peacefully in her car seat, tiny fingers curled around a well-worn, stuffed rabbit. Take the next right, Jack said softly, not wanting to wake the baby. It'll keep us off the interstate for another 50 miles. Leah nodded, fighting exhaustion as dawn slowly brightened the horizon. They'd been driving for nearly 8 hours, stopping only for gas at remote stations where Jack paid in cash. Her eyes burned, and her shoulders ached from tension. The sound of Molly stirring made both adults glance back. The baby's face scrunched up, a sure sign she was about to cry. "She's probably hungry," Jack said, already reaching for the diaper bag. "There's a diner coming up in about 10 minutes. Looks pretty isolated on the map." Leah watched in the rearview mirror as he tried to comfort Molly, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he stroked her cheek. The baby's whimpers grew louder. "I've got formula," he said, "but I haven't quite mastered the whole bottle warming thing on the road." "I can help," Leah offered, though uncertainty flickered across her face. It had been years since she'd cared for an infant, and never under these circumstances. The diner appeared like an oasis in the early morning. Light. A weathered building with a crooked Open 24 HRS sign and only 2 other vehicles in the gravel parking lot. Leah pulled around to the side, away from the windows. Inside, a sleepy waitress led them to a corner booth. Jack carried Molly's car seat while Leah gathered the diaper bag and her purse, feeling awkward and conspicuous. The fluorescent lights made them all look pale and tired. "I'll get some hot water for the bottle," Jack said after they settled in. "Could you—" He gestured at Molly, who was now fully awake and fussy. "Of course." Leah reached for the baby with only slight hesitation. As soon as she held Molly against her shoulder, something shifted inside her, a natural instinct taking over. She swayed gently, humming under her breath, while Jack prepared the formula. The waitress returned with coffee and menus, her eyes softening at the sight of the baby. "What a sweetheart. How old?" 4 months, Jack answered quickly, testing the bottle's temperature on his wrist. Leah took the bottle from him, cradling Molly in the crook of her arm. The baby latched on immediately, her dark eyes fixed on Leah's face as she drank. "You're a natural," Jack said quietly after the waitress left to get their breakfast orders. His voice carried a hint of both gratitude and regret. "I used to help with my sister's kids," Leah explained, adjusting the bottle. "Before—" She trailed off, not wanting to mention her husband's death in front of the waitress who had returned with plates of eggs and toast. They ate in companionable silence, taking turns holding Molly. When the baby needed changing, Leah grabbed the diaper bag and headed to the restroom, determined to be helpful despite her rusty skills. The changing table was rickety, but she managed talking softly to Molly the whole time. "There we go, sweet girl, all clean and dry." She smiled as Molly grabbed her finger, marveling at how quickly she'd become attached to this tiny person. Back at the table, Jack was tense, studying his phone. He waited until Leah was seated before speaking in a low voice. "We've got another problem." Leah's heart sank. "What is it?" "Tessa's mother," he said, running a hand through his hair. "She's hired private investigators to find us. She wants custody of Molly." "What?" Leah instinctively held Molly closer. "Can she do that?" "She's got money and connections. She's convinced I'm unfit, thinks I got Tessa killed." His voice cracked slightly. "She doesn't understand that Tessa made her own choice to protect our daughter." Leah tried to process this new threat. "So now we're running from both the Knights and private investigators?" Jack nodded grimly. "The PIs might actually be more dangerous in some ways. They can access records, track credit cards, work with local police. That's why we need to stay off the grid completely." They finished breakfast quickly after that, paying in cash and hurrying back to the truck. Leah insisted on driving again, knowing Jack needed rest. As they crossed the state line, she noticed him watching her in the rearview mirror as she sang softly to Molly. The day passed in a blur of back roads and brief stops. By evening, Exhaustion had settled into Leah's bones. When they spotted a small motel set back from the highway, Jack agreed it was time to stop. The room was basic but clean. 2 beds, a bathroom, and a small table. Jack brought in their bags while Leah carried Molly and a bag of takeout Chinese food. They sat cross-legged on one bed, sharing containers of noodles and rice, while Molly played on a blanket between them. "Here," Jack said, handing Leah the last egg roll. "You need to eat more than that." She accepted it with a tired smile. "So do you." After dinner, Leah transformed a drawer into a makeshift crib, lining it with blankets and placing it between the beds. She gave Molly a bottle and rocked her to sleep, humming the same lullaby she'd been using all day. "Get some rest," Jack said when she finished. "I'll take first watch." Leah meant to argue but found herself dozing off in the room's only chair. She woke several hours later, disoriented, to find Jack's bed empty. Panic flashed through her until she spotted him through the window, pacing the parking lot in measured steps, his shoulders tense with vigilance. She checked on Molly, who was sleeping soundly, then slipped outside. The night air was cool, and stars dotted the sky above the motel's flickering sign. Jack turned at the sound of her footsteps, relaxing when he recognized her. He looked exhausted, the weight of their situation evident in every line of his face. Leah moved to stand beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "You don't have to do this alone anymore," she said softly. Dawn broke over the small town of Miller's Creek, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. Leah steered their truck down the quiet main street, passing weathered storefronts and early morning dog walkers. The smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery drifted through their open windows, making her stomach growl. "Look," Jack pointed to a white clapboard church where people were gathering on the lawn. A hand-painted banner stretched between 2 trees read, "Summer Revival, all welcome." Molly fussed in her car seat, ready for her morning bottle. They'd been driving since sunrise, and Leah's eyes felt gritty with fatigue. "Maybe we could stop for a little while," she suggested hesitantly. "Get something to eat, let Molly stretch?" Jack studied the peaceful scene, his usual wariness warring with exhaustion. Finally, he nodded. "Church people tend to mind their own business. Might be safer than a diner." They parked in the gravel lot beside pickup trucks and minivans. As Leah lifted Molly from her car seat, a silver-haired man in a pressed shirt approached them, his smile warm and genuine. "Welcome, welcome. I'm Pastor Dave. We're just about to start our morning service, and you're more than welcome to join us." He gestured to folding tables laden with coffee urns and pastries. "Please, help yourselves first. Growing families need their breakfast." Leah felt Jack tense beside her at the word family, but the pastor had already moved on to greet other arrivals. They filled paper plates with muffins and fruit, finding seats near the back of the church where they could watch both entrances. The wooden pews were worn smooth with age, and colorful quilts draped the backs of each row. Molly contentedly worked on her bottle as more people filed in, many stopping to coo at her or offer friendly nods to Jack and Leah. When the music started, Leah's breath caught. The opening notes of Amazing Grace filled the small sanctuary, and suddenly she was transported back to Sunday mornings with Thomas, his strong voice harmonizing beside her. Her eyes welled with tears. Without thinking, she began to sing, her voice rusty from disuse, but growing stronger with each verse. The familiar words felt like coming home after a long journey. She noticed Jack watching her, something soft and wondering in his expression. "You have a beautiful voice," he whispered when the hymn ended. Leah blushed, wiping her eyes. "I used to sing in the choir before. It's been a long time." Throughout the service, Molly passed back and forth between them. Jack's awkward bouncing when she grew restless drew admiring glances from several grandmotherly types in nearby pews. He clearly wasn't used to handling a baby in public, but his gentle determination touched Leah's heart. After the service, they found themselves surrounded by church members, drawn by Molly's cherubic smiles. An elderly woman named Ruth pressed a paper bag of homemade cookies into Leah's hands. "For the road," she winked. "Traveling with little ones takes extra energy." They shared comfortable small talk over coffee and sandwiches, careful to keep their story vague, but honest enough. When Jack mentioned they needed a place to rest, Pastor Dave immediately offered the church's camping area behind the building. "We keep it for traveling families," he explained. "Has a fire pit, picnic table, even a bathroom with a shower in the fellowship hall. Stay as long as you need." The afternoon passed peacefully, as they did laundry in the church's machines, and gave Molly a proper bath in a plastic tub borrowed from the nursery. The simple tasks felt almost normal, domestic in a way that made Leah's heart ache with longing. As evening approached, Jack built a small fire, while Leah heated canned soup in their camping pot. The flames cast dancing shadows on the church's white walls as crickets began their nightly chorus. Molly was fascinated by the firelight, reaching toward it from her perch on Leah's lap. "Careful, little one," Jack murmured, gently catching her tiny hand. "Pretty things can still burn." They ate their simple meal in comfortable silence, passing Molly back and forth as needed. The baby's eyes grew heavy as the sky darkened, and soon she was sound asleep against Leah's chest, one fist curled in the fabric of her shirt. Jack spread a blanket on the soft grass, and they settled back to watch the stars emerge. The night was mild, with just enough breeze to rustle the nearby trees. Leah felt the day's tension slowly drain from her shoulders. "I can't remember the last time I felt this." Jack paused, searching for words. "This safe. This at peace." He spoke so quietly she almost missed it. "Thank you for everything you're doing for us." Leah's eyes grew heavy as she leaned against him, Molly's warm weight grounding her to the moment. Jack's shoulder was solid and strong beneath her cheek. Before sleep claimed her, she felt him adjust the blanket around them, his movements careful not to disturb the baby. The stars wheeled overhead as they slept, 3 hearts beating in quiet harmony beneath the summer sky. The first hints of sunrise painted the sky in soft pinks and golds as Leah stirred from her sleep. Dew had settled on their blanket overnight, and Molly was beginning to wiggle against her chest, making little hungry sounds. Jack was already awake, carefully folding their few belongings and stowing them in the motorcycle's saddlebags. "We should get moving," he said quietly, helping Leah to her feet. "We're only about a day's ride from Brother Calvin's place now." Leah nodded, bouncing Molly gently as she prepared a bottle. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding woods. She found herself humming one of last night's hymns while she packed, her heart lighter than it had been in days. The peaceful moment shattered when a black SUV turned sharply into the church parking lot, gravel crunching under its tires. Jack's head snapped up, his body tensing like a coiled spring. Leah had never seen such raw fear in his eyes. "It's them," he hissed, already moving toward her. "The Black Mesa Riders. Take Molly and run, now." "But, behind the church, into the woods. Don't look back, go." Leah clutched Molly to her chest and ran, her shoes slipping on the dewy grass. The baby, sensing the tension, stayed eerily quiet. Behind her, she could hear car doors slamming and angry voices rising. "Well, well, Jack Rayner. Been a while, brother." "I'm not your brother anymore, Drake." Leah reached the tree line, ducking behind a thick pine trunk. Her heart hammered so hard she worried Molly would feel it. Through the branches, she could see 3 men advancing on Jack, who stood his ground between them and the path she'd taken. "You really thought you could just walk away?" One of the men laughed, the sound ugly and sharp. "After what happened to Tessa?" "That was your fault, not mine." Jack's voice was steel. "You killed her. And now you're playing house with some church mouse?" Another man sneered. "That's not gonna bring Tessa back." The confrontation exploded into violence. Leah pressed her hand over Molly's ears as shouts and the sounds of fighting filled the air. Then came the distinctive roar of Jack's motorcycle, a sound of escape or pursuit, she couldn't tell. More shouting, a crash, and finally, silence. Leah held her breath, counting heartbeats. Molly squirmed against her, but stayed miraculously quiet. Through the trees, she watched the men drag someone, toward the SUV. Jack's body was limp between them. "No," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. She wanted to run to him, but Molly's warm weight against her chest kept her frozen in place. She had to protect the baby, had to honor Jack's sacrifice. The SUV's engine growled to life. Leah waited until the sound faded completely before creeping back toward the church, constantly checking over her shoulder. Her legs shook so badly she could barely walk. The church's back door was unlocked. She slipped inside, finding her way to the pastor's office. Pastor Dave was already there, preparing for morning services. He looked up in surprise at her tear-streaked face. "They took him," Leah choked out, sinking into a chair. "The gang, they found us. They took Jack." The pastor immediately closed the door and pulled out his phone. While Leah rocked Molly and explained everything between sobs, he made a series of quick calls. "Brother Calvin?" he finally said into the phone. "Yes, they're here, but there's been trouble." Yes, she's still got the baby." He listened for a long moment, then turned to Leah. "Brother Calvin says you need to come now, today. He's sending people to help Jack, but you and Molly need to get to safety first." "But he says Jack would want the baby protected above all else. You know that's true." Leah closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling. Of course it was true. Everything Jack had done was to protect Molly. The pastor pressed his truck keys into her hand. "Take my pickup. It's less noticeable than your vehicle. Brother Calvin's people will bring it back once you're safe." In a daze, Leah gathered their things. The pastor wrote down directions and pressed some cash into her hand, waving away her protests. "The congregation will understand. Now go, quickly." Leah settled into the truck's cab, cradling Molly in her lap since they'd lost the car seat with Jack's motorcycle. Her hands trembled as she turned the key. Through the windshield, she could see Pastor Dave standing in the church doorway, head bowed in prayer. As she pulled onto the highway, tears blurred her vision. Molly reached up to pat her cheek, as if trying to comfort her. Leah caught the tiny hand and kissed it. "Hold on, Jack," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm coming." She took a shuddering breath, straightened her shoulders, and pressed down on the accelerator. The rising sun painted the road ahead in gold, leading her toward the promise of safety and the hope of seeing Jack again. The old warehouse loomed against the afternoon sky, its weathered brick facade softened by climbing ivy. Leah pulled the borrowed truck into the empty parking lot, her arms aching from holding Molly while driving. A security camera above the metal door tracked their arrival. Before she could reach for the door handle, a tall figure emerged from the building. An older man with silver hair and kind eyes, wearing a simple button-down shirt with a clerical collar. He moved with quiet purpose, radiating a steady calm that made Leah's shoulders relax slightly. "I'm Brother Calvin," he said softly, opening the driver's side door. "You must be Leah. And this little one is Molly?" Leah nodded, too exhausted for words. Her hands shook as she passed Molly to him, so she could climb down from the truck. "Come inside," he said, cradling the baby with practiced ease. "You're safe here." The warehouse interior was nothing like Leah expected. Warm light filtered through high windows, illuminating converted living spaces with comfortable furniture, a kitchen area, and what looked like a medical station. Several people, the volunteers, she assumed, moved purposefully through the space, acknowledging them with quiet nods. Brother Calvin led her to a small sitting area where a pot of tea waited. "Tell me everything," he said, settling Molly more comfortably in his arms. "Start from the beginning." The whole story spilled out of Leah. Finding Jack injured months ago, his return with Molly, their desperate journey, and finally, that terrible morning at the church. Her voice cracked when she described Jack being taken. "You've shown remarkable courage," Brother Calvin said when she finished. "Both of you have." He touched Molly's cheek gently. "Sarah," he called to a nearby volunteer, "would you please take care of little Molly for a few hours? Our friend Leah needs rest." A woman with warm brown eyes approached, holding out her arms for the baby. Leah hesitated. "Sarah is ex-military," Brother Calvin explained. "She's trained in personal protection. Molly couldn't be safer." Leah reluctantly passed Molly to Sarah, who immediately began humming a soft lullaby. "There's a secure nursery space just through there," Sarah said, pointing. "You can see her any time." "Now," Brother Calvin said, "let's get you something to eat. And then you need sleep. We have work ahead of us." He led her to the kitchen area, where a volunteer named Marcus served her homemade soup and fresh bread. The simple meal brought tears to her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time someone had taken care of her this way. "You remind me of my daughter," Marcus said, refilling her bowl without asking. "She's got your kind of strength, the quiet kind that surprises everyone." Leah shook her head. "I'm not strong. I'm terrified." "Being scared doesn't make you weak," Brother Calvin said, joining them. "It makes you human. True courage is acting despite the fear." After eating, Sarah showed Leah to a small but comfortable room with a real bed. Through the window, she could see the nursery where Molly was sleeping peacefully under Sarah's watchful eye. For the first time in days, Leah let herself truly rest. She woke as sunset painted the warehouse windows orange. Brother Calvin was waiting in the common area with several volunteers gathered around a table covered in maps. "We have a location," he said without preamble. "One of our contacts, a former gang member, confirmed Jack is being held at the abandoned Simpson quarry about 20 miles from here." He spread out a detailed map of the quarry. "They're keeping him in one of the old equipment buildings here," he pointed. "Our intel suggests they're waiting for their leader to arrive tomorrow before dealing with him." Leah's stomach clenched. "Then we have to go tonight." "We've already started preparing," Brother Calvin nodded. "I have 6 trained volunteers ready. We'll move in under cover of darkness, using 2 teams. The first team will create a distraction at the main entrance, while the second team extracts Jack from the building." "I'm going with you," Leah said firmly. Several volunteers exchanged glances, but Brother Calvin studied her face carefully. "It will be dangerous." "Jack risked everything to protect Molly," Leah said. "I won't abandon him now." After a long moment, Brother Calvin nodded. "Very well. Sarah will stay here with Molly. The rest of us move out in 1 hour." While the volunteers gathered equipment, Leah went to the nursery. Molly was awake, playing contentedly with a stuffed bear. She reached for Leah with a happy gurgle. "I'm going to bring your daddy back," Leah whispered, holding her close. "I promise." Sarah appeared in the doorway with a black jacket and flashlight for Leah. "It's time." Leah kissed Molly's forehead, inhaling her sweet baby scent. Then she placed her gently in Sarah's arms and took the offered equipment. Her hands trembled as she zipped the jacket, but her voice was steady as she whispered a prayer over Molly's drowsy form. Brother Calvin waited by the door with the rest of the team, their faces serious in the gathering darkness. Leah gripped the flashlight tightly and stepped into the cool night air, her fear overshadowed by determination. They had to succeed. They had to bring Jack home. The quarry loomed ahead, a darker shadow against the night sky. Leah's heart hammered as she crouched beside Brother Calvin behind a cluster of boulders. The moon cast just enough light to make out the abandoned equipment building where Jack was being held. "Remember the plan," Brother Calvin whispered to the team. "Max and Tyler, you're with me around back. Leah, wait 2 minutes, then make as much noise as you can near the front entrance." Leah nodded, clutching the metal pipe they'd given her. She watched the volunteers disappear into the darkness, moving like shadows through the quarry's uneven terrain. Her palms were sweaty against the cold metal as she counted the seconds. When 2 minutes had passed, she crept toward a pile of rusted drums near the building's entrance. Taking a deep breath, she swung the pipe hard against the nearest drum. The crash echoed through the quarry like a gunshot. Bang, bang, bang! She struck again and again, her arms trembling with each impact. Shouts erupted from inside the building. A door slammed open, spilling yellow light across the gravel. 3 men emerged, their faces twisted with anger. "Hey!" one yelled. "Who's out there?" Leah struck the drum one final time before darting into the shadows. Heavy footsteps pounded behind her as she ran toward the scrubby brush at the quarry's edge. Branches whipped her face as she pushed through, trying to lead them as far from the building as possible. Inside, Jack slumped against a concrete wall, tasting blood. His ribs screamed with each breath. Through swollen eyes, he watched 2 guards pace nearby, their boots scuffing the dusty floor. Suddenly, there was movement in the darkness. Silent figures materialized behind the guards. Before either could shout, they were subdued, one in a chokehold, the other swept off his feet. "Jack!" Brother Calvin's voice was barely above a whisper. "Can you walk?" Jack tried to stand, his legs buckling. 2 volunteers caught him, supporting his weight between them. "Leah," he rasped. "Molly?" "They're safe," Calvin assured him. "Molly's at the Haven. Leah's helping us get you out." They half-carried Jack toward the exit. Outside, Leah burst from the brush, chest heaving, dirt streaking her face and clothes. The men chasing her were far behind, lost in the darkness. "Jack!" she gasped, reaching for him. "No time," Calvin ordered. "The van's this way." They hurried through the shadows, Jack struggling to stay conscious. Distant sirens wailed. Someone must have called the police. The sound sent the remaining gang members scrambling for their vehicles. They were almost to the van when a figure lunged from behind a storage container. In the chaos, no one saw him coming until it was too late. His shoulder slammed into one of the volunteers, sending both sprawling. Leah cried out in horror as she saw what the volunteer had been carrying, Molly. The baby flew from the volunteer's arms, but Jack somehow found the strength to break free from his supporters. Despite his injuries, he dove forward, catching Molly before she could hit the ground. They tumbled together, Jack curling protectively around his daughter. "Go, go!" Calvin shouted as police sirens grew closer. 2 volunteers scooped up Jack and Molly while others provided cover. They piled into the waiting van as headlights began sweeping the quarry. Through the back window, Leah saw gang members scattering in all directions, their planned revenge forgotten in the face of law enforcement. The van's engine roared to life, tires spraying gravel as they sped away from the quarry. In the dim interior, Leah cradled Molly while Jack leaned heavily against her shoulder, his breathing ragged but steady. "You came for me," he whispered. "Of course I did," Leah replied softly. "We're family now." The sirens faded behind them as they raced through the night, leaving the quarry and its dangers far behind. Back at the safe haven, the fluorescent lights hummed softly as a volunteer doctor examined Jack's injuries. Bruises darkened his face, and his ribs were wrapped tightly in clean white bandages. In the corner of the room, Leah sat in a rocking chair, gently swaying with Molly nestled against her chest. "2 cracked ribs," the doctor announced, "but nothing's broken. You'll need rest and time to heal." Jack nodded weakly, his eyes fixed on Leah and Molly. The baby had dozed off, one tiny hand curled around Leah's finger. The sight made his heart ache with gratitude and guilt. Over the next 2 days, Jack slowly regained his strength. Brother Calvin had given them a small room with 2 beds and a borrowed crib. Leah kept careful watch over both Jack and Molly, bringing soup, changing bandages, and singing soft lullabies that soothed them both. On the second evening, as sunset painted the room in warm colors, Jack finally found the words he'd been holding back. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly, watching Leah fold tiny baby clothes. "I had no right to drag you into this mess. You could have been hurt at the quarry." Leah set down the laundry and moved to sit beside him on the bed. "Jack, listen to me," she said firmly. "I walked into this with my eyes wide open. You and Molly, you matter to me, more than I thought possible." Tears welled in Jack's eyes as he took her hand. Before he could respond, Brother Calvin knocked gently on their door. "I have some news," he said, entering with a kind smile. "I spoke with Tessa's mother today, had a long conversation about you and Molly, showed her pictures of how well the baby is doing." Jack tensed, but Calvin raised a reassuring hand. Once she understood that Molly wasn't being used as leverage, that she's safe and loved, something changed. She's backing away from the custody fight. Relief flooded Jack's face as he looked at Molly sleeping peacefully in her crib, but determination soon replaced it. "I need to do one more thing," he said firmly. "I have to surrender myself to the authorities, clear my record completely, make sure there are no gang ties left that could ever threaten us again." Leah's hand tightened around his. "How long will that take?" "I don't know," Jack admitted. "But I have to do this right, for Molly's sake, for our sake." "Then I'll be here," Leah said without hesitation. "However long it takes, I'll be waiting. We both will." Jack's eyes filled with tears again as he looked at this woman who had saved him in so many ways. He stood carefully, mindful of his ribs, and walked to Molly's crib. Lifting his daughter gently, he cradled her against his chest with one arm. With his free hand, he reached for Leah, drawing her close. In the soft evening light, Jack looked at the 2 people who had become his whole world. His voice was thick with emotion as he whispered, "I want a life that keeps you both in it." The mountain air carried a crisp sweetness as autumn settled over their new beginning. 6 weeks had passed since Jack's supervised release, and each day brought small victories and tender moments that healed their wounded hearts. Their rented cottage sat nestled against rolling foothills, its weathered white paint and blue shutters welcoming them home each evening. The front yard boasted a small garden where Leah had planted late-season flowers, their bright colors matching the joy that now filled their lives. Jack threw himself into his construction work, his strong hands building homes for others while he worked to rebuild his own life. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, he attended trauma counseling sessions, learning to process the violence of his past and embrace the peace of his present. Some days were harder than others, but he'd return home to find Leah and Molly waiting on the porch, their smiles washing away his darkness. "The nightmares are getting better," he told Leah one morning over coffee. "Doc says it's because I finally feel safe." Leah had transformed their cozy living room into a cheerful daycare space, filling it with soft toys and educational games. Word spread quickly through the small town about the gentle widow who cared for children with such natural grace. Soon she had 4 regular families dropping off their little ones, and Molly thrived having playmates her age. Who knew all that time on the road with Molly would turn into this? Leah mused one day, watching the children stack blocks together. Her heart swelled seeing Molly share her toys, already showing the same kindness that marked both her protectors. Their days fell into a rhythm as sweet as a lullaby. Mornings began with Jack making breakfast, sometimes pancakes shaped like hearts that made Leah blush, other times simple oatmeal with fresh berries. Molly would sit in her high chair, attempting to feed herself, and usually wearing more food than she ate. Afternoons often found them walking the quiet neighborhood streets, Molly alternating between toddling along the sidewalk and riding on Jack's shoulders. Neighbors would wave from their porches, having embraced the little family without question. The suspicious glances that had once followed Jack were replaced by friendly greetings and invitations to backyard barbecues. "Amazing how life can change," Jack said during one of their walks, watching Molly examine a fallen leaf with complete fascination. "A year ago I was running scared. Now I'm building a future." Leah squeezed his hand. "We're building it together." That evening, after the other children had gone home and dinner dishes were cleared, they sat together on their small back porch. The setting sun painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold, while crickets began their nightly symphony. Jack had grilled chicken and vegetables, and the satisfied feeling of a good meal settled over them. Molly sat in Jack's lap, her dark curls catching the last rays of sunlight. She had grown so much in the months since they'd first arrived at Leah's cabin. No longer the tiny, frightened infant, but a curious, happy toddler who brought light to every room she entered. Jack lifted Molly carefully and moved to kneel beside Leah's chair. His eyes held a depth of emotion that made Leah's breath catch. Gently, he placed Molly in Leah's arms, where the little girl immediately snuggled close, as natural as breathing. The moment hung suspended, filled with unspoken love and possibility. Then Molly lifted her small hands to pat Leah's cheeks, her eyes bright with recognition and trust. Her little mouth worked carefully around the word she'd been practicing, and in the quiet evening air, she spoke it clearly. "Mama." Leah's heart stopped, then surged with overwhelming joy. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she hugged Molly closer, pressing kisses to her soft hair. All the love she'd held back, afraid to claim this child as her own, broke free like sunshine through clouds. Jack watched them, his own eyes glistening. When he spoke, his voice was soft but sure. "Leah, come home with us. Be our family. For real. Forever." The tears fell faster now as Leah looked at this man who had crashed into her life and changed everything. At this precious child who had claimed her heart so completely. At the future stretching before them, bright with promise. "Yes," she whispered, reaching out to pull Jack into their embrace. "Yes to everything." The sun sank behind their little cottage, painting the sky in colors of promise as they held each other close. In that moment, all the broken pieces of their past came together, forming something new and beautiful, a family built on choice, on courage, and on love that had survived the darkest storms to find its way home. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.